Hey everyone, and welcome to the Pisgah Podcast.
We are your hosts. I'm Mangler, and that is Drew, and you are listening to Pisgah. We're coming to you live from beneath a sign in the woods that reads, High Anxiety. Okay, everyone, we are back. Sorry for the downtime. We were on vacation riding bikes, but we've got some fresh content lined up, and we've been busy with microphones. Not to mention, we've got a really rad track to close out this episode with, so make sure you hang around.
On top of us being busy with riding bikes, there's been a lot of pros busy riding bikes too.
But before we get into that, let's touch base on our bike riding, because that's way cooler. So, Drew, we took the week off around the 4th, and you were up at Snowshoe. Tell us about it.
Man, the weather was great. There was rain the few days before we got there, and the dirt needed it. I can tell you that because there was great traction for the 4 days that we were there because of it. It was good for me. I did a lot of rebuilding of confidence after my shoulder injury, and a couple of things did take me by surprise out there. It's probably the first time in the years that I've been going to Snowshoe that single crown bikes vastly outnumbered dual crown downhill bikes. And the other thing that took me by surprise was the volume of women that were out there riding. It was far greater than in prior years. And I'm not just talking about the girlfriends and the wives of the bros riding up there. There was legit, like, just groups of women that were there with their own friends that were riding. And I think that's amazing. I think that's the future.
Man, having great weather in Snowshoe is always top notch because it can be kind of risky, but dude, it's awesome to hear about so many lady shredders on the mountain.
And so, Mangler, you just drove back across the country in your RV. How'd that go?
Yeah, originally we thought about leaving the rig out west for the summer, but decided to bring it back home. I kind of needed to do some updates and repairs, and we wanted it around for some East Coast adventures. But to take on the task of team stunting across the country, I convinced Brevard local Sean Zaleski to join me. His only requirement was that we had to go to Crested Butte, which, don't twist my arm too hard, but it was kind of a bittersweet trip. He had had a friend that succumbed to an avalanche last year. His name was Dan Escalante. And due to COVID, they couldn't really have a memorial service, so they were having one last weekend. And that's where we went. So we started our trip in Portland with a pit stop to visit old North Carolina BMX homie Ryan Barrett. And then we scooted up to Central Washington to round up with a squad of ex and current North Carolina heads. Park Baker actually met us up there, along with Evan Voss, John Funstein, Levi Rose, Cole Brisson, and then Bellingham native Finn Hopper. So a pretty stacked crew. We did some wild solstice riding, and after that we spent a few days in Bellingham, then scooted over to the Tetons and did a pass lap with Sam Jordan and their son Adam from the hub, then down to Grand Junction, then down to Crested Butte, and then kind of across the country from there getting blasted with rainstorms. So kind of all in all, great trip. Pretty good to not really get skunked on weather, except for, maybe some hopes of riding Bentonville area.
Man, I really need to make it up to the PNW. It's one of those zones that I haven't yet checked out. And yeah, but so let's get back to those professional bicycle riders.
Yeah, that's right. The USA Cycling National Championships took place this past weekend, and we had quite a few locals getting on the steps. So, Drew, run us down on how that went.
So I could take this a long way or a short way. So we're going to go the short way. There were tons of categories, age categories, juniors, masters, etc., men's, women's, and all of the mountain bike disciplines. So I'm just going to do the ones that kind of, matter the most commercially. So let's start with XC. XC women's. First place went to Erin Huck. Second place went to Alexis Scarda. And third place went to Rose Grant. I'm going to give Brevard resident Hannah Ahrensman props for finishing on the lead lap at 12th place. XC men's. First place went to Keegan Swinson. Second place went to Stefan DeVoust. And third went to Luke Vrounvelder. And have to give a shout out to Pisgah Forest local Cypress Gorey for finishing just off the podium in 7th place, while Brevard's Carson Beckett came in 14th place. And moving along to downhill women's, Kaylee Skelton got first. Representing Mooresville, North Carolina, Caroline Washam got second. And Ella Erickson came in on the third step. For downhill men's, first place went to semi-local Dakota Norton. Second place went to Pisgah Forest's Lucas Shaw, and third place went to Austin Dooley. And local Nico Mullally rounds out the wide angle podium with a fifth place finish. Young Chris Grice Hustle finishes at 11th place in pro men's, while Walker Shaw came in 15 seconds off the lead time, finishing 17th place.
Those are still really tight times. And here's something a little interesting. Riley Miller from Vermont, who is racing junior women 15-16, she placed first in that division, and her time was actually faster than Caroline's. Caroline is her coach.
That's super impressive.
You know what trail a bunch of those guys and gals really go fast on? Is Black Mountain, which, if you weren't aware, is going through a major reroute construction phase.
Yeah, this is a topic that almost everyone has a strong opinion about right now. I'm glad you got to speak with Shrimper himself to get the full scope as to what happened and why this reroute happened.
After you shoot the gap through there,
Alright.
then I want to come up through these two trees
Nice.
and
That's a sweet gate. I mean, I could probably just come around here and lead this whole section, or I can pull the loam and then come around.
pull the loam and then come back up, come around, and then get it. I'm Shrimper and I chase plastic flags through the woods.
Where are we at right this moment?
I don't know. I'm just somewhere on the side of Black Mountain, I guess. You
Yeah.
know, it's. I hadn't looked at a map in a minute, and the flags. It's like
You look one direction, you see one, you search around, and then you see another one up the hill over there.
kind of, and to keep them far enough apart that when they do the NEPA, it allows a little flexibility in between them. But you know, it's like what I see and what TJ sees aren't always the same thing, and what Michael sees are it's not the same, and it works out okay. No perfect trails.
Well, when it came to flagging this reroute, talk to me about how that process went down.
So 2014,
Mhm.
Sorba and Woody Keene, who has been the big spokesman for years and years and has made
Yeah.
so much happen, and they walked with a hydrologist the old creek or the old trail and kind of reflagged it, and that's when we did that flag line. But
Okay.
at the same time, we went with a bunch of crusty old Pisgah guys and grumpy naysayers about. At the time, the plan was two trails, a climbing trail and the descending trail, but there was not really a way to do that without the two
Intertwined.
crossing. And my thought is, if you build one good enough, it'll take care of itself and nobody's going to use the old trail.
Mhm.
And so those guys flagged out a 5-mile reroute,
Okay.
and the Forest Service kind of sat on it for a while, and then I guess when they got money for it, they asked me if I'd come and reflag it and make it more Pisgah-esque. In by that I'm thinking they meant steeper.
Okay.
Instead of, I mean, there's already going to be a riot out here,
Mhm.
and because of what we've done, for better or worse, and it's not better, it's different, you know, and there's going to be people upset. But if it was 5 miles long, so instead of a 20% gradient, what does that make it, like 4%?
Yeah.
And so now at 3 miles, I mean, that lower section, I looked at a profile of it and it's like 7.5%. But I know it's steeper than that because
it pitches
that's
up
coming
and-
off the old trail to that segment is from the old trail all the way down.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, there's some uphill in there, but
Mm-hmm.
and then the flat spot.
Yeah.
Fucking flat spot. What the hell? I mean, but that to me makes it an even better enduro stage if we're going to have that around here. And it's like, oh, sorry, you got to paddle.
Yeah.
And
You came out and reflagged it to make it more, quote, Pisgah-esque. What was your vision when you stepped into the woods? Like when you walk into the woods, let's say, did you come from the bottom or did you come from the top?
yeah, I mean,
Both?
I came from the bottom a couple of times, and then I came from the top a couple of times, and this one for me is, you can look at satellite views till you're blind, and then walk out here and see trees like these,
Yeah.
you know, and with these big trunks at the base, and no, they're not old growth, but they're 70 and 80 years old.
They're some of the
and-
oldest growth we have.
Right, and maybe by putting the trail here, we can somehow persuade people that these will be the anchor trees. Even if this does get logged out, maybe then they leave just the few trees that hold the trail
mountainside,
together, you know. And I mean, that's worked out really well for like the Shenandoah Bike Coalition. They look at plots of land that are going to get timbered,
Mm-hmm.
and then they see that, I mean, that has to get a NEPA study for the whole area.
Mm-hmm.
And then they've been able to persuade the Forest Service to let them flag a trail and flag key anchor trees, and it's not that many. Then the guys come in and they do their logging, they pull across the trail in just a few places, and it's kind of been beneficial for the club to get more trail and more trail improvement.
Yeah.
And I don't know that's, I was talking to the club today, and one of the guys in the club, and it's like they don't want to improve every rugged trail, and that's cool to hear. That's refreshing to hear.
Absolutely.
Too. And then it's like, well, like what we're doing, how do you find the compromise of, it'll be smooth for a while, but break bumps happen, and there's already some stuff starting to happen on that first mile.
Mm-hmm.
But that trail is getting pounded.
Yeah.
And I mean,
it's popular all across the internet. New Middle Black reroute's done, go ride it. So, I mean, I'd be interested to look at like maybe some Strava details on it to see like how many attempts have been done on it so far.
somebody told me it's almost 20-1 new trail to old trail.
Okay.
So when Noel and I came out and took down all the ropes and fencing, and we did it like a day early, and I wanted it to be a secret,
Mm-hmm.
and just let people get up there and kind of
Like,
start and
wait,
let it
it's not-
generate a little buzz. And well, that backfired, but anyway, we it was the middle of the night, and we hiked down and we untied all the ropes and took off the locks and chains, and on the Rudy section of the old trail where the new trail intersects, we piled a ton of brush on the far right, because everybody comes down that, and that line just gets wider and wider, and it's gotten, I think I measured it last time at 32 feet. From where the old trail was to where people are
cutting on the inside line.
cutting the inside line. Well, she piled up all that brush, because that's the line, that's the I can't do it line. All that brush is still there. That's the first time.
This lasted probably more than like 2 days.
A day. I mean, yeah. I was walking up the old trail, and there's a ride around, and I could see where it had started as a huck through some trees, and then it just getting burned into the dirt as the straight line. So we're closing that trail, and I was all grumpy and piled up a bunch of branches and rocks there. And 2 days later came back, and somebody had taken the branches leaned them against the tree and piled the rocks up against that and made a jump so they could go 20 feet down the trail. And it was I don't know who it is. I know some of the people that do those things. Sometimes they confess.
Yeah. When you come to an area like this that we're standing in, it's a prime example of a somewhat mature forest. You know, we've got very low underbrush, we've got tall canopy hardwood trees, a gentle slope going one direction. I see your flag on, I hear where TJ's at in the machine right now. When there's not a flag line here and you stand right here and you're looking around, what is it you're looking for?
A sustainable way up, not a comfortable hiking grade, because this is a hiking trail first.
Yep.
And I don't know why people come to Pisgah anymore. I do, but it's like when I used to come here in the 90s and the late 80s, these were the only trails. And I got into biking not for jumps, but to go on hiking trips. On your bike, you can do a 3-day hiking trip in a day.
Exactly.
And sleep at the hotel, which is kind of nice when you do manual labor for a living. And so that's always had a huge appeal to me. And now I know people come for the ruts, but originally weren't they coming for the hiking trails? And Laurel is still a great one.
Absolutely.
You know, Squirrel is, nobody's really had to touch that. The steep ends they've had to do stuff with. But I mean, that to me is classic hiking trail. And the 401, I mean, the spectacular view and just how fast can you go?
Yeah.
And so now this is kind of a hybrid of wide enough to step off if you're a hiker or biker. You want to, I mean, I've passed two-way traffic on this. And when on the parts that I've built and ridden, and it's a mellow walk, you can't imagine backpacking up Old Black Mountain. Well, I mean, it's like,
I've climbed it on my bike.
Yeah, you've thrown or pushed your bike up and now to hear people say, "Oh, the upper lines are riding great."
Oh, what?
What are the upper lines? I mean, I can't make that trail enjoyable for myself, so I hadn't ridden it in a while. But I know any trail I ride, I see where the groove is, and the groove is always in the easiest place. Always. Even on the hardest trails,
Grooves in the
groove's in the easiest place, and so maybe Pisgah is rocks we can ride around. You know, it's big rocks that we can ride around, or maybe, and around is not left or right necessarily, but over. And I'm seeing people like boosting some of these little rock gardens, and you know,
I'm guilty of going around that.
Go around. I mean, yeah, it's like we wanted it gnarly, but we're riding the dirt.
Yeah.
And I know it's not every rider, and I know there's people that straight line, and then there's guys on bigger bikes that are just like shopping around the edges of the trail, and what they see is not ever what I see, and you know, they turn nothing into something, and like a 2-inch root, and you do it really well, I mean, and boost, and then turn something into nothing. There's a big pile of rocks, and there's a little root. You hit the root, you send it, you're over the rocks. And the week I spent on the rock garden,
that I just skipped over.
That you just skipped over, and it's like, okay. I mean, and I love nothing more than to see a talented rider hit my trail, and like,
I could have saved 2 days of work if I just not done that rock garden. And
exactly.
A lip here and a landing.
Exactly. But that's the cool thing about a subtle trail is I was told I needed to put some jumps where the rocks are in the curves of this newer section. And it's like, nah. So my Bergen, my son, he hates those rock piles that beginner riders will always ride around or try and straight line. He's like, you were making me go around them, and then I figured out how to jump them.
Yeah.
And it's like either way he's going around.
Mm-hmm.
But that way he's a talented rider, and I don't have to worry about building something that somebody can't ride, but they hit it anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And build enough space and some things in there
People will
to
find
let
it.
people be creative.
Yeah.
And I mean, there's some stuff in here that I think is going to be pretty big sins
Yep, I've eyeballed a few already.
that require pinpoint accuracy on your landing. But
Yep. But that's Pisgah.
if they put a speed limit on a trail, you guys would go nuts. And like, nope, never riding there again. They got a speed. Well, how are they going to enforce it? Let them catch me, you know? But to make a twisty, put enough twist in it and put a few trees in, you know, it almost makes its own speed limit.
Yeah, that's what we call trail speed.
And here, where it's wide open, you know, let them eat. You know, it'll still be up and down and twisty, but with sight lines this far long, I already took away the straight down. I don't want to take away all the speed.
Yeah.
I mean, mountain bikers are my friends, no matter what I put in the trail that they don't like.
This is an interesting part of the forest because it seems like a lot of sections of Pisgah get thick with rhodo and like overgrowth, but it's nice to be in a spot like this.
It's and you know, that's the casual angle of getting up the mountain.
Mm-hmm.
And I just started walking out here, and it's like, wow, there's a spring just over the hill here, and there's a couple that the trail crosses, and I mean, this would almost be a really nice campsite.
Yeah. If it were level.
Yeah, if it were level, but now everybody has hammocks, so.
Yeah, that's true. Let's back up a lot more than that. How did Shrimper become the trail builder? You've got an interesting past.
Yeah, I mean, was a landscaper out of college doing commercial landscape installation, and we did walking trails there. And where I lived, there were no trails, but there was lots of empty land with absentee landlords, owners.
Yep.
And so, no, it wasn't the right thing to do. So like a lot of people, I went out and built some trails in public right-of-ways, like power lines, and the power company owned a whole bunch of land down by the zoo in Columbia, and big boulder drops and rolls. And we were out there with rakes all the time. And I and a race promoter who's local to here worked together a 40-mile dirt loop around the city. And he put a race, I mean, that was like one of his first races.
The complete
bootleg
race.
Yeah, and all dirt, and like you're on water pipes going across the canal. And I mean, it was an epic adventure. And then moved up here, didn't have any friends, didn't know anybody, and started volunteering on trail work days. Met a bunch of people that are friends to this day. Got invited to go work at FATS with Long Cane Trails.
Okay.
And
FATS is the trail system.
FATS is down in North Augusta and Forks area trails, and it's like 30 miles of purpose-built flow, and they had gotten grant dollars to build all that, and I was just labor cutting back slope and that kind of, and it was a really cool job. I mean, and those guys do, and this, I had a difference of opinion about how I felt like trail should look and be built. And they build these killer trails, but they're too wide for my taste. I think I'm going to take heat on this one for the trail being a little too narrow. And it just, to me, a trail is smaller and more intimate. And when I use an excavator, it's only 11 horsepower, so you kind of have to work with the land.
Yeah.
How
wide is it?
It's 39 inches.
Okay.
1 meter, Michael. 1 meter.
1 meter.
And I don't know, is it 39 inches or 1 meter? Which sounds smaller?
1 meter.
Okay, and so to go metric, new bikes have what, 800 millimeter bars,
Yeah.
a whole bunch of them.
Mm-hmm.
So that gives you 100 millimeters on either side
Yep.
when I'm going through some of these squeezes. So tall fella like yourself, you better not lean over at all.
Some of your trails, I've definitely had to do the manual bar turn to get through some spots comfortably.
Well, then my friend hikers are my friends, bikers are my friends, but sometimes y'all need to slow down.
Yeah, natural speed bumps. So you built some rogue trails that you guys put, it sounds like a kick-ass bootleg race on at.
Yeah, he did.
Yeah.
I mean, he's to this day, he's puts on some of the best, most well-run races around.
And then that's cool to hear that you work on the stuff down in Augusta. And then when did you and Noel move to?
Well, we moved here in 2002,
Okay.
and that's when I started volunteering with Woody.
Okay.
And Todd Branham and I went out and did a bunch of stuff on Cove Creek together. And I mean, we've moved some rocks down on Sycamore that are there to this day. I mean, there's some slabs in the creek that at one of the creek crossings that we were told would never work, and they're still killing it today.
Yeah.
So after Long Cane, Trail Dynamics hired me for a while. Then I've just kind of subbed around and did a bunch of sub work for single track trails, and they ended up like buying me out, and I needed a boss. I'm terrible at the paper stuff. I like to make bulldozer noises in the woods, and bulldozer noises and smiles, and I guarantee you'll giggle when you get to the bottom of this new stuff.
That's great to hear. How long have you been with single track now? Like less than a year?
I started working, subbing for them in 2013,
Okay.
and was worked for them in Nashville then, and then in 2014 I did some stuff for them in Wisconsin, which if you've never been to Cable and Hayward, is like well worth the trip.
Okay.
And and then it's just kind of been like the mercenary trail builder for a long time, and then went to Colorado for them in 2019
You did a big Europe build.
with Chris Bernhardt and Chris Kmeyer. I want to say their company C2.
Okay.
and they did a big bike park design in Austria. They hired up a whole bunch of independent contractor diggers, and I mean, that's a cool
Flew
summer.
you guys up there.
Yeah.
Now that you're working for single tracks, how has that changed the dynamic of how you kind of approach things?
Well, they help me keep on a schedule way better. And I mean, it's in the past I've worked by myself, maybe one or two people, and now I've got two crews of 4 going. And I mean, that was what I did when I was commercial landscaping. So it's like more making sure the dirt worm is in a good environment.
Yeah.
So like tools are sharp. Is the fuel down there when they need it? Do we have the tools that we need to get the work done? Are there 0 questions on the flag line where it's going? And then just trying to stay ahead, and then dropping back and filling in anywhere that I think I can help without stepping on anybody's toes.
So it sounds like you went from basically like doing the full thing to now you're kind of resource management with added support.
Production management would be we charge by the foot and bill by the hour. So I mean, it kind of takes, I can't make everything exactly how I want it,
Yeah.
but I can get it real close, and I know I can stack material like rocks. You see all these little piles of rocks out here, and it's like they aren't enough to do anything with in that spot. But if the bike club wants to have a Canicom, a tracked wheelbarrow, and collect all those and put them, then they can get them to, there's a couple of spots that are a little bit wet.
Yeah.
And then they can armor that up. I mean, but the resources are there, and they don't have to spend time searching the wood. Well, they're not allowed to.
Yeah,
Right?
you're not supposed to go off the trail corridor.
So everything, and it's like, really, I need about 1,500 pounds of rocks all in one spot before it's worth it. I mean, from the production aspect to put in the rock garden, because part of that is like, even when it's that much, that's like 10, 15 square feet tops.
Yeah.
And there you go, jumping it. And then I have to read on the internet that there's no rock gardens. And so, oh, yeah, well, and I say, well, what kind of bike were you riding? Well, 160 millimeters of travel. Does it gobble bumps? Does it gobble square edge bumps? It's like,
Well, if you look at the manufacturer's literature on the bike, yes, in fact, it does.
they're out to get me. I mean, I'm working my butt off trying to make something, and this on a 26-inch wheeled rigid bike, 3x9 gearing, will be perfect.
Right on.
You know,
So talk to me about the crew. Is it a collection of some local?
a couple of guys from Greenville and young lady from Pittsburgh, but who has been living in Grand Junction for a while,
Okay.
and then a kid from the Outer Banks, and then a kid from Balsam Grove, somebody from Palm Beach, and so kind of all over.
Yeah.
And a crit racer, a mountain biker, a hiker, and it's like we kind of having TJ here help. I mean, that's been nice.
Yeah. So you've got a good, solid, well-rounded crew.
Right, and you know, as long as I give good direction, overall, everything, I can sleep at night. You know.
What were your thoughts on the pressure that is on you for taking on a monumental task of rerouting the Black Mountain Trail?
Well, that sign down there that says high anxiety, about 2 weeks before the election, that popped up on the corner by the Ag Center. So right the day after the election, I parked and I grabbed that. I mean, I have a collection of different signs that maybe I shouldn't have, but you know, I hadn't taken to stealing roadside crosses yet.
Yeah.
And I've heard there's people that collect those. So anyway, that one is like, I'll need that one day.
Yeah.
And I've got two of them, and one of them I put on the top of a hill across the road from my house. So from way off, up on top of Sassafras, you'll see a little. And I'll go pull it down in a little bit, but.
Yeah. So.
But yeah, I mean, yeah, it's all my friends. I hope they're being honest with me. You know, I mean, I try and take criticism and try and change things and make it for the better. But you know, at the end of the day, it's like I've been. It was a victory of attrition. It's the only reason we got this job. Is like I kicked and screamed for a long time and have been dinking around on this mountain since 2014, working on the reroute, and thankfully we got to build it.
Yeah.
And now I hope it's right. And are there things I would change? Yeah. But you know, overall, I think it's still going to be a blast.
Yeah.
And the things that I would change, y'all might not notice.
You originally did some of the trail alignment adjustments. What was that? 2018
Yep.
on the upper stuff.
Yep.
That led below Turkey Pin a little bit, right?
Yep. It started right there. I took the machine all the way to there and tried to just put in drains. And
Yeah.
I want to say that in the mile of trail, I touched about 1,000 feet of dirt, digging out drains, and there's no kickback. I mean, you know, usually there's a dust up on the internet.
Yeah.
When something, it was kind of. It wasn't. I guess it wasn't as rad as what they did on Avery Creek. So it's like.
So.
But that's probably me just being the hiker and just trying not to really touch the trail at all and keep it the way. And my gosh, the bottom has fallen out of that thing since then. I mean, it's more traffic and more traffic. It's like more wear and tear. It just is.
Yeah. If traffic in Pisgah would have stayed the same as it was pre-2008, do you think we would see the erosion levels and trail issues that we see now?
Probably just, I mean, that's a tough one, because once I mean, when I started riding that, it was like a level trail, lots of pine needles and roots that were still alive.
Yeah.
Once you cut through the roots and kill them, then the rut starts to happen. So there's some reroutes on the stuff between Presley and Thrift. There's some micro adjustments in there that people have forgotten about, and it was just where the trail had gotten like 3 or 4 feet deep. It's full of leaves. Those are full of leaves now, but it's still a ditch straight down the mountain.
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't get better.
Yeah.
It never, and then, you know, at some point there's going to be a big rain, and well, Green River Game Lands is a pretty good comparison to what Pisgah used to be, and then it's certainly gotten more use over time, because it's one of the few places you can go straight down and nobody yells at you and
But that trail system's been running since what, like 2014 or something?
something like that.
And every trail's had big washouts on it, almost.
And you know, I hope, from what I'm seeing on this, it shouldn't be a thing.
Yeah. Because like once you cut into the topsoil and you give water a direction to go, it's going to go there.
Yep.
And it's going to go there and bring all of its friends and do it more and more and more.
We want to be hydraulically invisible, so that we don't, I mean, there's spots where the water is going to go down the trail a little bit, but then it drains off.
Yeah.
In dozens upon dozens of places, and never is it a situation, a complete vertical alignment.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, at some point the trail has to go uphill.
Yeah.
And some of these side slopes are really mellow, which is nice. I mean, and then so you got to make it steep at some point, and yeah, the water will flow, but not at such a volume as it is on the old trail.
I spoke with TJ on the phone a week or so ago, because he called me and asked me my opinions on Middle Black. And I gave him my thoughts. I asked him how Middle was going to compare to the Upper. And he definitely said Upper was going to have a little bit different feel of it.
Yep.
So how would you describe that?
I mean, there's a heaps more rock.
Mm-hmm.
The side slope is mellower in most areas. I mean, so it's more open woods.
Yeah.
The Laurel, I mean, the gradient is just so perfect. The side hill to put in a trail that you'll be busy on your bike.
Okay.
You know, you'll have to steer. You'll have to make some inputs, and left, right, up, down. You know, and that's, I don't know. Seems like bikes are built to go in a straight line anymore. They seem long these days.
Yeah. You think Upper is going to definitely have a little bit more of a different feel than Middle?
I mean, it's going to be 2 miles of almost all downhill, and yes, there's going to be flow, you know, it's like that'll happen. And just because to get water off the trail, you have to make it go up and down.
Yeah.
And straight lines are boring. And in landscaping, and curves are what grab your eye and pull and make you what's around the next corner.
Yeah.
So when you're walking, if you have any sense of curiosity, that's what pulls you around
it pulls you up the mountain.
And then the flow. That old trail is 15 feet wide, 8 feet wide, 20 feet wide, and the groove uses up all of that width anymore. And the amplitude, that's what we were talking about. The other, I mean, the amplitude of those, of the curves that people are making as they're going down
So you've got
that
the
super steep.
The amplitude of the trail as it lays now is very minimal. But then there's another amplitude wave in there that is the rider's line.
And exactly.
And it is a much tighter wave.
And it's more like downhill skiing, I guess. And back in the day when brakes sucked, you know, you could read a whole article about how to control yourself by going side to side on the trail like a skier does.
Mm-hmm.
Now we do that on the trail, and you only have a 3-foot wide option of where to go.
Yeah.
And maybe that's not your wavelength. And I apologize, you know, but it's like, I think you'll be able to get into, I think you'll find a station, you'll be able to tune something in that you like. I mean, I'd hate to have to use math out here more than I do. And it's like, just like, oh, well, it's 29-inch wheels with the 67-degree head angle and yeah, rigid single speed, sure. I mean, I don't know. I'd check the setting on the excavator.
How has been building upper compared to Middle been? Because it seems like the side hill on Middle was a lot steeper.
A lot steeper and, I mean, a little scarier. I mean, that means you got to move a lot more dirt and initially, and probably freeze thaw will cause that trail to narrow even a little bit more. And, you know, it's going to be so sunny in the wintertime. I think that's...
Because it's kind of east facing, right?
Southeast.
Southeast facing,
and you can see Rich Mountain, you can see Cedar Rock from there. I mean, which was, I don't know how that's geographically possible to, from that side of the mountain, to look up the valley and see that, I think.
So that's good that it's kind of facing that direction to keep the wintertime riding going decently.
And then I think this is going to be super sunny. I mean, this all is southwest facing. So is that a good thing or a bad thing? I don't know. Because right early in the morning and it'll all be frozen, right?
Yeah. What's been working on this one like? You said it was more rocky.
I mean, it's just such a cool section, zone, that I mean, these woods are so stinking beautiful, and it runs out another 1,000 feet and turns, and I mean, there'll be twisty laurel up here and a few creek crossings for the dogs, and no, I mean, this to me is like being able to take people for a walk in the woods, and you'll be able to ride up it, and you're not going to be looking at the dirt wall in front of you with, you know, and looking at how that drool comes off your lower lip and goes to your top tube when you're pushing up that other side of the turkey pen. It's like, there's a lot of stupid races that go up that, and I've been a proud participant, but it's like, I'm not going to miss that at all.
No. That's one thing I am very excited about is the pure single track options.
Sycamore, grassy thrift, this to the top, drop down over by the shelter and come down all of Avery and then pop. I mean, that's pretty epic.
Because like, I mean, prior to this, you go do like a clawhammer black buckwheat Bennett. What is that, like a 13-14 mile loop? You're looking at like 7 to 9 miles of gravel.
Yeah. Noelle and I, on our honeymoon, 1993, came up here, and our last day we parked at Sliding Rock, rode up to Club Gap, all the black, clawhammer black over a single track down to the road, and then and then had to pedal back up the side of 276, which I'm not that kind of athlete.
That's too much sports.
I was sporting too hard.
you guys are looking to wrap this project up in
Middle of August.
Middle of August.
Yeah, we got places to be. We got to go to Minnesota, I think.
Okay.
Or maybe New Mexico, or one of those M words, you know.
Wherever your new bosses send you.
Yeah, my handlers.
Yeah, your handlers. Well, in the words of your awesome wife, make good choices.
Every day. Every day. I rarely know where I am.
But you know where the flags are.
But I know where the flags are, and I know there's a beer downhill from here.
Is it cold?
No. Trails don't build themselves, and cold beer, I mean, that's just a layer.
Yeah. Shrimper, thanks for your time.
Sure, Michael.
And
Mr. Mangler.
is there if there's a way people can keep up with what you're doing? In other words,
You can't keep up with me.
in other words,
Maybe on a bike, maybe, but.
are you active on social media?
Yeah, I guess.
You
What is
the
that?
pot
Limp?
on-
Yeah, I do stir the pot at Limp and Shrimp
Yeah.
on Instagram, and that's. And I won't tell you about my stolen Twitter account, but it'll be fine.
I'm gonna make our way back down to the boys, see what they're up
Yep.
to. Sounds like it got too quiet over there.
Yeah, they quit.
They quit on you.
That'll happen.
Wow, there is a lot there, and I don't want to make up anyone's mind for them, but decisions and work like this have so many facets and have so much time invested into whatever the final actions come to. And I don't think that's something that many end users can comprehend.
You know, you're right, and it's something that you kind of have to just like have an open mind about, because there's maybe some things that you don't understand or some things that you may not know all the ins and outs of.
For sure. And we don't always have to agree about it all either. I don't fully agree with the reworker's take here on modern bikes, for instance, but you know, he comes from that base and he's gonna go with it.
So while I was up recording that interview with Shrimper, we got dumped on rain. And looking at our weather report, you know, you kind of can't go off that because it's probably going to rain somewhere in the area sometime in the afternoon. It just depends on where you want to roll your dice at.
Yeah, here we don't normally close trails for weather in this general region, which is something a lot of people that come from outside of the area don't really understand.
Unless it's freestyle, then everyone
for
just
sure.
runs away from freestyle. Well, guys, that is a wrap on this week's episode. And as always, you can find us on social media. Just search Pisgah Podcast. And we've got shirts for sale with $5 going to Pisgah area Sorba. Just hit up pisgahpodcast.bigcartel.com.
And if you didn't know that the Black Mountain Trail was in Brevard rather than in Black Mountain, North Carolina, then go ahead and click subscribe and pay better attention next time.
All right, guys, we've got a special treat for you that hung around and listened to this entire episode. Our good friend Jeff Balcom is a member of a local band called SHUN, and they recently dropped their full-length self-titled album.
And if you want to find Jeff and meet the guy that's laying down the thwomp here, you can find him hanging out at the hub just about the time that Lindsay yells last call. He'll pipe up.
So true. You know, he usually closes up shop and then proceeds to shred bass in songs like this.